CIS and Senteon webinar series, a deep dive into the CIS benchmarks to harden Windows workstations and servers. Today's topic is printers, and I am your host, Zach Krumkowski from Senteon, joined by my co-host, Rich McGraw from CIS themselves, and we're joined by our reoccurring special guest, Marty Godsey. How are we doing today, guys?
I'm not too bad today. It's unseasonably warm here. I live in Kentucky, and it's almost 80 degrees, and it's November 8th. It's
Kentucky. I could have swore it was Ohio, Marty. Did I have this wrong in my head?
I lived in Ohio for about 3 years.
Maybe that's it. I wish I could say the same, but not nearly as warm in upstate New York.
Right?
Is it ever that warm out there?
I don't know. I think I missed it this year.
Yeah, I have a good friend of mine, Rich. That's he lives here in Lexington, but he's a Maynard. He's from Maine.
Okay, yeah. Always cold.
So yeah, he talks about when it gets cold here, like 20 degrees. He's like, "What are you talking about? This is nothing." He's going out in shorts and a tank top.
Yeah, in the ocean's always like 50 degrees there on the coast. Mm-hmm. It's always cold.
I am not built for that anymore, but we have an awesome topic today, guys. Printer settings for servers and workstations. So this was a hot topic. I didn't have to pull any teeth to get guests to come on to talk about printers. It's an MSP's favorite space, right? Right, Marty?
Oh, we love printers. We absolutely love them. Love them like Office Space. Love the printer on Office Space. That gives you an indication.
They're a wonderful attack vector. Mm-hmm. I actually did a little, experiment using Google Dorks, if people are familiar with them, and searching for, if you use the proper Google Dork and put in a search criteria like, I don't know, Xerox Phaser or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable the amount of printers that you can actually attach to that are wide open on the network. And, they have operating systems, and it's a way for folks to get an initial access to a network.
Excuse me. Definitely it is. Well, not only just the access to a network. I mean, it also, too, you start looking at HIPAA compliance or any type of compliance. If you're scanning or printing, all that stuff's kept in a buffer in the printer. And yes, the printers have gotten smarter, and you can turn those off and it deletes them. You can get compliant printers. I mean, I have a Canon behind me that's it's our default printer that we recommend to people whenever they want general office printers, and it has a lot of HIPAA settings on it. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, Rich, they're a little OS just like anything else, and they connect out to the web just like imagine having a little Raspberry Pi. That's pretty much what it is, sitting in that printer, and they can be attack vectors just like anything else.
Yeah, you can download code to run on that little OS to do all kinds of fun things if you choose to be malicious.
Oh yeah, and it's years ago I did a project for Lexmark. Everybody knows who Lexmark is. They're great printers. I've never had issues. But the division, I built a data center for them, or revamped a data center, and it was for the PS and SD division. And that particular division was actually the division that was responsible for writing the OS for the laser printers. And it was, at least back in 2004, 2003, when I did this project, it was a Linux OS is all it was.
Yeah. What build? Well, I don't know if details are appropriate, but so you took an open source build of some sort that you could run on, on a micro level, and, hardened it best you could, and there it goes. Something like that.
Exactly. So yeah, printers are there. Plus, too, when they break, they're the MSP's biggest nightmare. As I've always said, that I'm done dealing with Betsy's printers these days.
Well, printers, they're also, they require updates, firmware updates, OS updates, and it's just many times the case where it's attached to the network, and if the ink runs out, it's an issue. But other than that, it just goes and goes and goes.
It does. And not to keep going too long, Zach, I know we got a schedule today. With some changes too, I'll keep them nameless, HP. But with changes to where a lot of the printer manufacturers are requiring you to register and connect your printer to their cloud before you can even use it.
Yeah, and how do you do that? Publish an IP.
Yeah, and so yeah, there are some printer manufacturers out there these days that I don't use anymore because it literally is that simple. Even getting something like their $300 black and white laser printer. So we're talking, if you think about printer standpoints, on the inexpensive side of laser printers, right? Still had to be registered and connect to their cloud before you could even use it locally. You had no choice. It wouldn't even activate.
My strategy for securing printers in my home office, which is the only place I work, is no printer. I haven't had a printer. I haven't had a printer for years, quite honestly.
There you go. Yeah.
You print a PDF, whatever you need to do, and I find no need to have a printer personally.
Yep. Yep.
I like that. Sounds like we got the right host for the show. Did not expect to go that deep right out of the gate.
Swinging.
But I will know. It was interesting. So I did present this topic to quite a few MSPs, and like Marty said, we really did pull teeth maybe to get Marty here. He's happy to help, but printers is not the most sexy of an unsexy topic already. So, but what was interesting as I did present this to other MSPs, mature MSPs, the settings we're going to talk about today aren't always followed, and in some cases they didn't even know they existed. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times you get that printer to work, it runs, and you never check on it again. It's working for the client, so why do anything else?
Correct.
So that's going to be the whole goal of today. We're going to talk about why you need to do a little bit more than just have it printing.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And Zach, when we say printing, we're talking about multi-function devices in general on the network. It's because I don't think you can buy a straight printer that doesn't also do 9 other things. So these
Not
are
anymore.
multi-function devices, and they do play a key role for organizations. People do rely on their printing. Not me personally. It's not part of what I need to do in my role, but it's a key element for operationally for lots of organizations. And when you're taking a look at an organization's printers, it should be considered an element of risk in a couple of ways. One, as an attack vector, but also if the organization, and Felicia talked about this a couple of weeks ago, or I'm stealing her lines because we learned from Felicia. Thank you, Felicia King. If that printer is really critical for business operations for whatever it is, you need to make sure that thing stays up. And then you want to look at defense and depth techniques, if that is a critical element of your infrastructure in general.
Exactly. And to that point, Rich, I have a couple of our managed security clients that heavily use their printers. We have one in Tampa,
Sure.
for example, that they print. They print on average of about 1,500 to 2,000 pages a day, and it's a
they're sad if they can't do it.
Exactly. Well, it's they do HIPAA work with HIPAA, so it's even a further step. And we, what we recommend, what we have in place as our managed security customer of ours, is we work with their IT, and we limit that those printers are, of course, statically assigned, and those printers have no outbound at all. They're blocked at the router. It's from the MAC and IP just to get around it changing IPs. They're blocked. They can't go anywhere outside the network, period. Now, obviously,
are they on a subnet as well, Marty?
Actually, they are. They're on their own subnet.
Nice.
Their own subnet and blocked. So for the people, and they're even taking one step further, they're connected to a print server. So that way, even individual PCs can't even connect to it. It has to go through the server. It may seem extreme.
Nice.
Yeah, it may seem extreme, but to your point, and to your point, Zach, they're set and forget. So once you set them and you forget them, well, then kind of the whole out of sight, out of mind. Well, if it's an attack vector over here, well, it's out of sight, out of mind. You don't think about it. So you want to, from the very get-go, make it as locked down as possible. That way you can kind of set and forget it to a degree.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and Marty, what you just described may not be what every organization needs, because they print 20 pages a month for whatever they have to do. It's still an important security attack vector, but downtime is not going to put them out of business, so to speak. So you don't need as much environmental control as, the organization you described, correct, Marty?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's all driven by need.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you're printing 20 pages a day or 20 pages a month, then you can, there's still, I think, some things that they need to do at a very minimum. I mean, I think at a minimum, you block it from outbound connections to the internet, which is pretty simple.
Yep.
Putting it on its own subnet, putting it on another server, that's level 2, level 3, like CMMC. That's CMMC level 3 or 4. But to your point, Rich, if it's just a simple printing where it's not mission critical, then just block it from going to the outside world and leave it at that.
Yep.
I like it.
I like that. And there is one very relevant trade show going on while we're having this webinar, IT Nation, hosted by ConnectWise. So
Yep.
I want to ask a takeaway question. Obviously, Senteon's touching a lot of these settings and securing printers. If we were to have a booth saying that we secure printer connections, do you think we'd be the most popular there?
I think if you had a booth that said you don't have to worry about your printers, and we fix them and take care of them, you would have everybody there pretty much.
Zach, you know what? If you added, if you just added scanning to that, I think you'd be good to go.
Right, exactly right. Yeah.
No, I love that. But trade shows are a big piece of our industry, working with MSPs day in and day out. That's really where new technology is found. Obviously, we do these webinars, educational. But Marty, you've obviously been in the space for over a couple decades at this point. What's your take on shows? Have you been to IT Nation? What can you share us about your experience?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, gosh, this is actually my 30th year in this industry. I started in 1993, right?
Few decades.
Few decades, yeah. I've been to IT Nation once. It was a long time ago. And of course, over the course of my career, I've been to lots of other trade shows. I think trade shows have their merits as long as you go there with either A, no expectations, or B, going there knowing what it is. Because, there's technical conference like the LISA conference, the Large Installation System Administration. That's taken it back a number of years there, Rich. You're probably familiar with Usenix and LISA. LISA is very tech focused. Their vendor room is very small. They have some vendors there, but it is very tech focused, very, very tech focused. But then you go to something else, another convention such as, DataCon or anything like that. And it's a lot of sales pitch. It is with a little bit of tech sprinkled in. So they all have their merits. What I do think conferences are good for is and I know this is not in general specifically for conferences. I think they're very good for just building contacts and building connections. Very much so. IT Nation itself, it's been, probably 10 years or longer since I've been to an IT Nation, but it still fit the same mold as everything else. I kind of put it in there with SMB Nation. You've probably heard of that one as well, and a few others. But no, they can be very helpful. They can be very beneficial as long as you go there again with the proper expectation that, okay, I'm coming here, in my opinion, I'm coming here mainly just to build connections and relationships.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that, Marty. And may I add, there's different tiers of conferences. I like the conferences that are a little bit smaller, where you can have more conversations that are meaningful. I had a really good experience at the PAX 8 Beyond conference in Denver this year, just because it was more manageable and kind of easier to get around and have those conversations. And then, you have the mega conferences, and I set my expectations different for those, things like RSA or the big cloud conferences like AWS. That's coming up fairly soon. CIS will be participating in that. So personally, I set my expectations differently for the size and, sort of focus of the conference, and try to get the most out of it. And I would agree that really making those networking connections is a big part of it.
Yeah, you're talking about big conferences. It's like VMworld. VMworld, even when it's running well, is a madhouse.
I went to that this year in Las Vegas.
Was it Las Vegas this year? Yeah.
Yeah, and then followed that immediately back to back with the Google conference, Google Next, I believe they call it. So it was 2 weeks, drove from Las Vegas to San Francisco, and yeah, 2 big conferences back to back. So that was something in August of this year.
Yeah, exactly. I almost see VMworld as not a conference. I see it as an event because it's like 5 days. I mean, it's an all week long thing.
It's a
So
whole ecosystem.
yes,
It
it
was
is.
fun doing Google Next though in San Francisco because I got to do the live stream from Zach's
That was an
office in
awesome week.
Palo
It
Alto.
was great having you out here. I love that. So Marty, you mentioned how these shows you do build connections and more about the relationships. Obviously you get those sales pitch and you learn new technology, but
Yep.
you don't go to these all the time, right? You said it's been a decade since you've even been to IT Nation. So as an MSP, how do you learn of new innovative tech? Is there a better means than shows for your style, or what can you share on that?
Shows are nice, but then shows are also very, very, very specific. Typically, you go into
Mhm.
a DattoCon, they're going to focus on things that work well with the Datto ecosystem.
Sure.
You go to, Kaseya, their conference, things that work well there, and they try. They're good, but really, as far as new tech, it's just really being a part of various groups that are out
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
You got like in Discord, for example, we use a lot of AppGate. AppGate is, not to plug them, that is the only VPN. I use that with quotes. It's zero trust. We do zero trust network architecture design and implementation, and that is the only product we use for our zero trust is AppGate. And within Discord, I know a lot of the people on this channel probably know what Discord is. There's an MSP Geek channel, an MSP Geek server that has hundreds and hundreds of vendors on it. And
Yep.
on top of that, it has thousands and thousands of MSPs that are a member, and it's active. I'm talking about it's very active. And
Mhm.
there's chats going on, there's BOFs going on, there's people getting in there and talking, like doing a little BOF where they're in voice. Even something that one thing, that one MSP Geek, you almost wouldn't have to go anywhere else because
Wow.
you're in a huge environment of thousands of other people that are doing the same thing you're doing. And so,
Sometimes that stuff's I like that, Marty, but sometimes that can be one overwhelming and
can be.
two not always you don't always know what you're getting. I think it's definitely buyer beware out of a Discord channel.
Yeah.
I don't want to shout out on PAX 8 too much today, but PAX 8 really does, they have their cloud marketplace for MSP solutions
Mhm.
that are vetted solutions that cover they're really trying to cover all of the various areas of CIS controls through unique solutions and sort of even starting to do some of those mappings with vetted solutions. So I like to steer people more in that direction because, things like Discord, while very helpful, are a bit of the wild, wild west.
Mhm. I would agree with you on in general. I think MSP Geek's a little separate because MSP Geek is actually monitored and created
Yep.
specifically by. If you've ever been there, you probably know what I'm talking about. But I do agree with you in general, Rich. You do have to be careful joining just some random Discord because you never know. But then again, too, it goes into the Reagan era, trust but verify, right? And then
Oh, yeah.
and then
I
points
love
of
that.
information too. I got this, this person said that this product works great, and this person said this product works great. Well, then this person on this forum says that this first product works great. It's like, okay, well, let me do my own research. So that, on
Mhm.
top of that, I think, doing your own research as you hear these things can't be discounted at all.
You do need to be extra careful. I mean, there's been recent instances where apps have snuck into the Microsoft App Store,
Yep.
Apple App Store that are malicious apps that even get into these trusted venues,
Mhm.
so to speak. So you do have to be careful.
Social engineering at its best, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really really amazing thing. So, sounds like really following these forums, engaging with the community is a lot of how you find these technologies. And Rich talked about how these technologies are starting to align to CIS. Obviously, this webinar series is all about educating on the CIS benchmarks and sharing awareness just on CIS as a whole. So, do you
Mhm.
mind just taking a minute or so and introducing, do you use CIS internally, and talking about this vendor mapping to CIS? When you choose a new solution, do you think of CIS in that selection process and where they fit into the framework?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that we that's really one of our tenets is, I mean, and has this hurt me or has this helped me in business? It is both. We have a no compromise approach to security. I
Mhm.
mean, if we're going to work with someone, it has to be a win-win situation. And part of that win-win is, hey, these are the controls that we're putting in place based upon CIS standards, based upon NIST standards, blah, 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 blah. And if you're not willing to do that, well, then thank you for your time and we move on.
Well, if you're moving people, your client base towards zero trust, that's a non-compromise approach, which is awesome.
Exactly. Oh, we have one client that they're getting there. They're a CMMC client, but once they get to where we want them, even internally on their desktops internally, they cannot get to their file share unless they are logged into AppGate. Period.
Excellent.
The file server is completely separated, and then on top of that, another product that we use, unless the machine has that product installed. I'm not trying to plug other products here, Zach.
You're good. This is educational. Share your stack. It is all good.
Basically, ThreatLocker, if they don't have ThreatLocker installed, we won't even talk to you. So that on top of AppGate, I could, someone can come in and plug their laptop into the network. If they happen to pull an DHCP, an IP address, or statically assign it, nobody will talk to them because
and these are affordable tools.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So Zach loves it when I drag the show down a rabbit hole. So let's go, Marty. Right. Just one more question in this path of zero trust. Can you share? Let's say generic organization that wants to move to zero trust. Maybe you name the size. How long does that project take?
Oh goodness.
I know it's not easy.
What's that?
I know it's not easy.
No, it's not easy. In a perfect world, if they work with us and they can work with at our speed, with our processes that we have in place and all of our procedures that we already have written, says, okay, this is step one. I would say, a company of 50 to 100 people, we can move them to having a full zero trust model to the way that I mentioned to you. 60 days tops.
Wow. That's fast.
Yeah. But that's if everything falls in place perfectly. Let's say if I call them up and say, hey, we need to implement this and we're going to do it in 2 days.
Your mileage, definitely varies, but yeah, in a perfect world, that's awesome.
Yep. because the tools, the tools, we have those to where they can be remotely installed just with a click of a button. Everything in our stack can be installed at one time with one click of a button. Once it's installed, then it's going in there and, it installs it in such a manner that it's not enforcing yet. It's just watching. And then we spend a little bit of time watching and then, and then we do a lot of things in parallel too. And that's the key to getting it done in 60 days. You can't do it. So, you can't do it in series. You have to do a lot of things.
Multiple work streams.
Yep.
Yeah, so you heard it here first. If you're looking to move to zero trust that's based on CIS principles, Marty's your guy.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, very cool. Let's start diving into today's topic. Printers. So hardening your workstations and servers so that you do have secure printer connections and you don't have CVs like Print Nightmare with Print Spooler coming out to get you and all the other fun, dangerous things that continue to be exploited. So, Marty, typically at this point, I'd ask you to introduce what the section's about, but I think everyone in the audience probably knows what a printer is.
Exactly.
So
Rich doesn't use one.
And they know that Rich doesn't use one. So let's actually just hop into the first slide here and show some of these MITRE techniques of how they may take advantage of a printer if it's not set up in a secure way. So if you don't mind just calling out a few of these, all of these, and talking about what they are.
Sure. So of course, Print Spooler exploits. Again, it's going into same thing. Print Spooler is just, everyone knows what a Print Spooler is. It's holding that in queue. It's holding that document in queue, and can be used as an attack vector because again, it's sending data to the printer. Anything that's sending data to the printer can be exploited. That's what it boils down to.
Same thing. Could have like remote code execution.
Anything. Mm-hmm. There's been some recent 0 days that have come out to where, there's remote access is not needed. All the user had to do was literally look at something and it was executed. It was an email. So yeah, anytime you have a data connect, what's that, Rich?
Nasty.
Yeah. So anytime you have, any type of data exchange, that is an avenue for exploitation. It's that simple. Unauthorized redirection, of course, with remote work happening more and more, You got printers sitting on someone's desk at their house, but they're working off of a VDI setting in a data center, and people are like, "Oh, I'm secure." Yeah, no, you still have that redirection coming back to something here. And oh, do you also print to your house? So yeah, the unauthorized redirection. Of course, RPC, remote procedure call. Everybody, the RPC has been exploited for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Port scanning exploits. So yeah, pretty much. And then of course the driver installation updates. That one is a huge one too, in my opinion.
So let's highlight that one. Why is that such an important layer to harden and prevent manipulation to?
Yeah. So the reason it's hard is because it's necessary. You have to have a driver, and then B, you're installing something on your computer. So if it's from a source that you don't recognize, or if that driver gets compromised, then you are in all of these driver updates. They're changing things at a Windows administration level. So you're giving this program, hey, I trust this printer driver. While I'm installing this, you're giving that program administrative rights to that machine. So it may be installing the printer driver, but at the same time, with administrative rights, it could be installing something else, and you don't even know it.
So could a bad actor say that it's just a general update? And
absolutely. Yeah, that's what happened with, not to call them out, because I know they're getting smacked with it right now, like SolarWinds. That's what happened. That was one of the cruxes of the SolarWinds, installs or updates. Is SolarWinds was compromised, and of course I'm highly, summarizing it here.
Sure.
SolarWinds was compromised. Their update file got compromised, and then they sent out, hey, there's an update. And of course, it was coming from SolarWinds. So everybody else was like, oh, well, this is good, I'll update it. And then everything was planted.
Wow. So did you follow that SolarWinds thing closely at all? Is that, I mean, what do you think at a high level? I understand the CISO basically got blamed. There was maybe misinterpretation or misdocumentation of their security posture. What are your thoughts on that? Just to give a little side topic.
I think it comes down to no one wants to be someone looking over their shoulder. No one wants that. Hey, I know what I'm doing. I'm doing this for years. Or, hey, I know my job. No one wants that. But what I think is happening is, and I don't want to make this a political statement, right?
Sure.
Is I think there needs to be more verification that things are actually happening that are said to be happening. Of course, that's where your auditing comes in. Is if we're saying we're doing X, Y, and Z, well, then show me we're doing X, Y, and Z. And I think that's really what happened there. I think that, I never followed it real close, like every particular article that came out. But from what I've been reading from the various sources that I go to, is that the CISO was stating certain things were being done, but they were not being done. And it got exploited.
He was trusting, but he didn't verify.
Correct. He was trusting and not verifying. And again, people don't want someone, constantly over their shoulder. But then again, there has to be some degree of accountability and auditing that has to happen, even at a high level, or it's going to continue.
In what, Senteon, right, Zach? I mean,
yeah, I mean,
those are the guardrails that run in the background that, you don't have to be the bad guy. Run Senteon, and you have identifiable risk that can be communicated across the organization and addressed.
Right. I appreciate that plugin, and I do want to share a little bit about Senteon, because this is our space, right? Being able to prove and attest to the functions that you're executing on, right? And it's funny because
is that what it's called?
Attestation, something important like that, some A-letter word.
Wrong.
But when we went to market, we actually didn't have a high focus on reporting and proving. We just thought, as a young company, hey, if we harden the Windows box, we did our job, right? If we make hardening feasible and completable, and rather achievable, that's good enough. Turns out it was good, but it did not really hit that hockey stick growth we really anticipated at that point in time. So we did need to build out the solution a little bit further and have this reporting capability, documentation, cross-mapping CIS to the regulatory framework. So it turned out to be so much more critical than we anticipated. So
I mean, that's how CISO protects themselves so they don't end up in this untenable position, right?
Yep. So I'd love to swing it back to Marty. When you are looking at new technologies and vendors, how important is that reporting aspect for you to talk to a vendor? Like how high of a need is it for them to have good reporting capability?
Oh, it's absolutely needed. I mean, it's because you can't verify. Again, it's like looking at a green OK button. It's like, all right, is everything okay? And it's just a green checkbox. It's like, okay, you're telling me things are okay, but show me how you got that. And so I think the reporting capability is critical for the standpoint of A, making sure that an MSP can sleep at night, and B, I think also too, coming like mentioned in Senteon, I think, let's say Senteon's providing a service. Well, let's also too, this protects Senteon, because then as an MSP, I can't come back to Senteon and go, hey, Senteon, you said it was a green checkbox, but it really wasn't doing anything. No, if you have that reporting that, you have, and B, you share with the customers, it kind of protects you, because you're like, no, we told you right here that this was good, or we told you right here this was bad, and you chose not to do anything about it. So reporting in general is critical. What's that?
Audit trail,
100%. And so yeah, I mean, reporting is absolutely critical, in not just security, but many other things. I mean, we have a customer right now that's dealing with they're a call center, and I'll keep the vendor that's the call center VoIP nameless, because they're actually a good vendor, but their reporting is kind of lackluster. So they're still trying to figure out, so my customer is still trying to figure out, well, what's truly happening here? How many are my agents missing calls? Are they doing this? What's their status? And so reporting is so important in so many aspects of running a proper IT.
And would you say it's always been that way, or is this like a trend that is becoming top of mind even more so?
I want to say it like this, and it might sound a little mean. I think it's always been an issue for the people who truly knew what they were doing.
I like it.
For the people who were very small or didn't know what, or not say didn't know what they were doing, but for the people who didn't get to a certain skill level, they didn't worry about that kind of stuff. Oh, it works. Okay, it's working. We're good. But for the people who got beyond that certain skill level or beyond that expertise, it becomes more apparent that, oh, well, I kind of want to know this. I want to know that. And I think, so that's why I said it sounded kind of mean. I think it really depends upon where you are in that whole scale of who you service. So,
and I think I'd add to that too, Marty, that, reporting and being able to have this audit trail on what you've done in the, the historic record of change management, and if you will, it's been really driven by insurance claims and things like that, where regulations and so forth really have driven that to be not a nice to have, but really a need to have, to be able to make those demonstrations that you're doing the right thing, that you have the basics under control, that your exceptions are documented with valid reasons, and all of that. And once again, Senteon does that, but but they do it in a fashion that is around CIS policy. So we love that. And in the CISO that we talked about, who's looking at a bunch of personal trouble, this is potentially a get out of free jail pass by having all of this information right at your fingertips. It's like, hey, what did you do? It's like, all right, click, click, click. Here's how we mapped each of these frameworks. Here's how we documented our exceptions. Here's where we were at, during this time of attack. And, quite honestly, if, maybe if they had all of that, they wouldn't have ended up in the situation that, where things got to.
Well, I think you're exactly right, Rich. And I think it's, they may still be in the situation, but at least they would have evidence to defend themselves.
Yep.
I like that a lot. All right, let's get into the settings here today. So I do have my screen open, showing a little bit, but the big thing here, this report piece is absolutely critical, and having that attestation, like you're saying, and having these cross mappings appearing, that's what you need to prove it. And these CIS benchmarks are all preventative and hardening to make that attack path more difficult, right? Better securing the system. So let's get into some of these settings now.
Yeah. Well, and sorry to finish out that last thing real quick, to your point, Rich, we just did an audit about a month ago for a school system that an on-site audit. We traveled there in North Carolina, and we went there to do there for 2 days on site because they were renewing their cybersecurity, their insurance, and their insurance basically says, "Well, show us your most recent audit," and they were like,
"Wait, what?
What audit?" And so they had us come in and do an audit for them, and
perfect.
Or they could not,
right?
That's good. They could get insurance.
Now, let me ask you this, Marty and Zach. You're gonna have to hold because I know you love our rat holes.
You're good.
So, how many projects did you identify for your organization following that audit?
About 3.
Exactly. It's a roadmap for projects, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, that's the value. It's like, all right, it's great to do the audit. You're identifying where the risk is, but then it's a clear opportunity for you to help mitigate the risk.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I love that.
And since we're talking about this attestation, in the background, I did just generate one of these reports. If we can pull it up on screen. So this is exactly what we're talking about, being able to prove where your baseline starts. And this screams exactly what Windows defaults are, right? With CIS, you're only about 20% compliant with CIS, and you have all of these non-compliant gaps. And I can filter this so we see all the non-compliance at the top.
So
but the really cool thing and important thing as a CISO, let's say you are working in, we can say CMMC, NIST, PCI, whatever that is. You can add those in and then see exactly where they fit into other relevant frameworks. And if they have no cross mapping, then CIS will leave it blank, right? Mm-hmm. So all of this data is absolutely a piece of that attestation process that they could have, leveraged to prove their security posture and prove they were doing what they said.
Yep. So, and it's in a dashboard. You don't even have to print it.
No. Talking about printers.
Talking about printers, let's get into some of the settings. So we do have about 23 minutes and 12 settings to cover. So fortunately, a lot of these settings do really overlap each other. They're all connected. So I think we'll make time just fine. But kicking off with this first one, Print Spooler to accept client connections. So if I have this correct, this is the Print Nightmare CVE from a couple years ago. And noting in the last version of the CIS benchmarks, I think V7, this wasn't even in there yet, right? It hadn't been exploited yet, so it wasn't a recommendation. And in the update, as CIS does, I think yearly, I don't know the exact time frame, it was added to it. So security recommendations change, and CIS is incredibly good at keeping up to the best it can.
Recommendations.
Yep. So Marty, tell us a little bit about this, and if you remember anything from Print Nightmare, go ahead and share that detail as well.
Oh gosh, well, kind of like Nightmare, you want to forget it. But no, this one definitely is. Print Spooler by default, it just accepts connections, and I think there's some changes, but this really goes into that whole creating the data connection. If I have a data connection, I got an attack vector, and so it just if this is not disabled, it allows printing without it being shared. You can just kind of, basically, it's no different than printing directly to the printer itself. So this really comes into requiring Windows to go to a print share versus going directly to a printer and not being able to print to it directly. So that's where it comes into play, is this right here, is that creating that connection. Enable it. Again, if you're in an environment, share it. Even if you don't have a server, take a workstation, because you can do a printer sharing on a workstation. Take a workstation, say, this is my printer share, and you share it from there. That way everybody has to come there to then print. Yeah, you do get a reliance on making sure that computer is on all the time, but for those small offices, to Rich point a little earlier, to those small offices that don't print a whole lot, well, then that's okay. But yeah, so disabling that just kind of prevents you from directly printing to the printer versus it being shared.
Makes sense. And help me understand this a little bit further. Of course, high level educational. As a business owner, am I that concerned of I guess bad actors printing, right? Or just causing a print to happen that I didn't want. Is that what we're talking about, or is there a larger foothold to the entire network by getting into the printer?
No, it's a larger foothold. Printing, like you're
Okay.
saying, is if they print something you don't want, then okay, what are you going to get? You're going to kill
You
a few more
shred it,
trees.
right? It doesn't matter.
You're going to kill a few more trees, and you may have something print out you don't want to see. The real issue is what we were talking about earlier, which is that printer, if it's a network connected printer, is a little OS on your work, is a little OS on your environment. It is yet another thing that can be exploited or compromised. And so
drop a
that's
payload
really
on that OS and do nasty things, right?
exactly. So that's really what you're protecting against. Is you're protecting against the little OS that runs that printer that's connected to the network from getting compromised and being an attack vector inside your network without you knowing.
Okay. No, thanks for going a little bit deeper on that setting. I want to make sure it was clear to the audience. So let's get into this next setting. Configure Redirection Guard. So we do want to make sure that this is hardened so that the bad actors cannot redirect various prints or certain jobs. But talk to us about why a bad actor would want to be able to do this.
Oh, well, it goes into really RDP. This one right
Mhm.
here is really more for RDP connections. It goes to the home user to where they're using, they got a printer sitting on their desk, they need to print. And of course, already kind of actually going back a little further, printing in general, and we'll get into some of those settings actually, we'll talk about it here in a moment. Printing in general, if you look at what file sharing is, people think file sharing and printing are two different things. It's not. It actually started out as the same exact thing. That's why it's called File and Print Services, SMB. CIFS, so the mechanism by default for printers to be able to print is not via, and we'll get into this over TCP, it's via authentication. This happens via SMB. So you have to be able to authenticate via SMB by default, talking about Windows 2000 and all that, to be able to print. So, back a long time ago, they were really the same function, and they still kind of are the same function. Now there's settings that are on by default that change that. But for the most part, if you're not careful with it, it can, you'll see you got DCOM and you got RPC. But as far as the redirection standpoint, this is a setting that protects those streams. So what this setting will do is it'll say, okay, if I have a redirection of a printer, well then once that redirection is authenticated, because it has to be authenticated, and there's some more settings as we get to it here that talk about authenticating that redirection. Well, then that's the only place that I'm redirecting any printers. Anything else tries to print, from a redirection, I'm going to deny it because it's not an authenticated connection.
So if something was denied, is it possible today for that MSP to get an alert of a redirection being stopped? And would that be an indicator of compromise, or a signal of an attempted compromise, rather?
It could be. I'd say it'd be something that if you get enough of them, because it's not just going to happen once. Any bad actor out there is going to try more a couple times. And even if you get those little script kiddies out there that are running a script, if you get one, then okay, that's if you get a couple, but if you start getting them often, or you can see it, and this goes back into threat hunting, actually kind of going into and this is someone you may know, Rich, that I talked to quite a bit, Matt Barrett. You remember Matt Barrett and Joe Dressel? There's those guys at Blackhawk. I work a lot with Blackhawk. Actually, Blackhawk is part of our solution too. It's not a question of when you get compromised. It's a question of, if you get compromised. It's a question of when you get compromised, right? And so following trends and looking at trends. So to this particular thing, if you start seeing that, hey, I had a redirection attempt, but the guard protected it. If you start seeing a pattern and it happens more often, well then, okay, that's something to investigate, because it's now not just once every couple of weeks or once. No, there's a little bit of a pattern here. This is happening every day at about 2:00.
There's a vector that's trying to be exposed. So what is that root cause?
Exactly. So, and then too, going into logging and going into this, knowing this information is vital to determining where they have already been or where they are in your network.
Yep.
Scary.
Thanks for that deep dive explanation. And speaking of the RPC TCP, we're going to get into those 5 settings that directly relate to that. So, I know you're going to tie a lot of these together, so we will go at your pace here. But go ahead and talk to us about why CIS would recommend RPC over TCP.
Yeah, definitely. It's because by default it happens over DCOM, which is over SMB. I apologize. Which over SMB. So again, it goes into you have to have an SMB connection, which is by default 445. So you have to have that SMB connection open for it to be able to authenticate you or allow that RPC communication. Whereas if you do it over TCP, it's able to make its own TCP connection. That way you can keep those ports closed and only have the ports open that you need for it. So this is going into what we were talking about earlier, to where you have the file and print from the old days were really one and the same. This is was the beginnings. Whenever this setting came out, this was the beginnings of trying to separate those to where they're now actually two different things versus the same thing.
Zach, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember the episode. I feel like we talked about SMB in some
we
other
definitely did.
context, and the I believe the recommendations are not just don't use it in general for anything.
Right. There are updated networking protocols, V2, V3, but SMB1, this original state, not
Correct.
recommended.
No, not at all.
Not recommended for anything, as far as I know.
Right.
But it still comes enabled by default.
Go team.
Yep. And there are reasons, if you are using computer browser, I think some IIS, you may need SMB, and there are use cases. But like we talk about in those episodes, minimal. Like we talk about in those episodes, document, create your exception, monitor, and as soon as you can, eliminate such exceptions.
Yeah. If you're using SMB, you want to identify that as a risk and make a plan to get away from it.
Yeah. What we do real quick on V1 is if we have a customer that requires V1, which is thankfully, a very, very, very edge case. We actually do that on a Linux box. So we will stand up a Linux box, install Samba, install V1, because I know this is a Windows-centric show. However, you can harden Linux you can harden Windows too, but Linux by default comes out very more secure than Windows.
Yeah, it's more the case where you have to start opening up or turning on services for things to run versus just run everything by default.
Correct. And of course, separate that out, to its own VLAN too. And, so if there are that cases for V1, we will, but we do that in a very, very specific, very controlled manner. And place it behind something. There's like, okay, you can only talk to the people you need to talk to, and that's it.
Love that.
All right, let's get into this next RP setting, making sure authentication for outgoing RPC connections is enabled.
Again, it layers back onto the SMB. Any type of RPC connection. RPC has been exploited for years. Because what is it? It's a remote procedure call. It's doing you're over here telling a server over there to do something. Well, that's the whole point. That's the whole vector of an attack. Someone attacking you remotely.
How does that fit into zero trust, Marty?
Fit into zero trust. It comes into control again. It comes into, we don't trust you. If you don't authenticate, we don't control you. Trust you.
It doesn't fit into that at all, does it?
It does not fit into it. It's like, oh, we don't know who you are. Sorry.
Nope. Perfect. I have no idea who you are. We're done here.
Yep.
And but, just like, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to go to the next setting. Just like we do talk about the outgoing connections, we got to talk about the incoming connections. So again, RPC over TCP. Probably the same explanation here, Marty, but anything else you want to add to this?
No, it really is the same thing. It's just different directions. And the whole point of those two settings specifically is to get that authentication and get that communication off of SMB. That's really the point of those three settings, is to get it off of that protocol to where it's separate, it's handled separate than SMB is. Because SMB, even V2 and V3, they're more secure and they're used, and they can be secured, as we covered in the other call webinar. But I don't want two functions having to share the same thing, especially when they're different and can be attacked differently. So those three settings is all about separating that. And this, again, is just the other direction coming in.
So, Marty, if you are engaging with an organization to help them with zero trust and they're using an RPC protocol, what's your recommendation?
Well, it's. Are you talking about RPC internally, or well, it really doesn't matter internally or externally. That's the whole point. Is
an open port, right?
You're treating your connections, no matter where they are, as untrusted. It comes down to ports and IPs is what it comes down to. And even beyond that, if you really want to get sticklers, even passing those ports and IP, those connections through a device that you can then do DPI on as well. So I open up this port and open up this, this IP, they can talk to each other. So now I'm restricted, A can only talk to B and that's it. But what if A gets compromised, or what if something happens to A? Okay, it can only talk to B, but now it can potentially exploit B.
Can mess with B, yeah.
It can mess with B. So if I have, it allows me, when we start doing that, it allows you to be able to do more, more inspection on those packets and actually see what's going on and do some IDS, IPS. Is that, to me, that's the extreme case. That's getting really, really paranoid. But you have the ability to do that when you start putting in a zero trust model to where you're specifically saying only these ports and these IPs. You narrow that whole scope of what you have to worry about.
I like that. I'm a paranoid kind of guy.
Right.
All right, we got 5 more settings here, and we're right on schedule. So this next one here, we already confirmed to use the RPC, but now we also want to make sure the authentication protocol is set to negotiate or higher. Could you explain what this means?
It comes a lot of these. Some of the settings within Windows is either, hey, authenticate with me, but if you don't, that's okay. I'll let you in anyway. Whereas this goes along with that setting. Is like, hey, we either negotiate an authentication or you can't connect to me.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect. I don't think there's more explanation needed on that one, but that's perfect. So this next one here, it's going to switch gears and talk about the RPC over TCP port enabled to 0. So what does this mean here?
Like a lot of things in Windows, actually a lot of things in a lot of services, sometimes they're specific, SSH port 22. Mm-hmm. But what a lot of people don't see or realize, and some people do, again, real quick to explain what I said earlier, is I see the industry as, how a lot of times in an industry you have kind of a pyramid. A lot of people at the bottom, and as you're going up, you have more people with the higher skill set, and it's kind of even. As you get to the top, the people that really have a lot of skill set. I see the IT world not as a pyramid, I see it as a Hershey kiss. So you have a lot of people at the bottom that are kind of around the same level, maybe a little higher.
I like that. Okay.
But then when you get into the people who are more of a specialized or more of a higher end skill set, the number of people that have that skill set very quickly gets smaller.
Exponentially gets smaller.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's why,
Marty, I'm not even going to ask where you put me in that Hershey kiss, because I know I'm down. I'm down in the fat part, aren't I?
You're at the top. You're right. You know how in the Hershey kiss you got
I'm not at that chubby part.
You know that little curl at the top of the kiss? You're right at the tip of the curl. Okay.
Yeah,
about to drop off to the bottom.
About to drop off to the bottom. Yes. So no, I mean, a lot of people don't realize that, there's destination ports and then there's source ports. And by default, a lot of services just grabs a random port, which can be a good thing. And that's what this is. RPC in general is a set port. I can't remember what the port is offhand, but setting this to 0, as you had on it, dynamically allows to dynamically just choose a port. Here's a random port, which makes it more difficult because it's kind of security through obfuscation. It makes it more difficult to exploit, because that way, instead of hammering on 3389 or hammering on 22, it doesn't know where it's going to be. So they have to spend more time to try to search for it. And then when they search for it, then that should hopefully give you a better indication, because you're going to see a port scan out there.
Yep. So by hardening to these CIS standards, you're making yourself a more difficult target. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's what the name of the game is. The name of the game is reducing attack surface. And then, because you're never going to be able to have no attack surface, never.
Yep.
You're always going to
use the machine. You have to use it.
Have to use the machine. So the name of the game is making it
collaborate, at least in some instances.
Exactly. So the name of the game is making it as small as possible, and then once you make it as small as possible, you make it as difficult to exploit as possible.
Yep, I like it. All right, we're going to get out of these RPC, TCP settings and go over to a different category of the same. So print driver installation set to administrators. These benchmarks always talk about user rights assignments and making sure administrators only have the permissions they need to. So explain to us why we don't want users just running wild and installing print drivers.
Because why not? I like making things interesting for myself. I mean, I don't live life and say why. I live life and say why not. Kind of talking a little earlier. Anarchy, right? A little earlier, where you and I, Zach, were talking about print drivers. By default, you have to have administrative rights to install print drivers. It modifies, system 32 values. It modifies the registry. It modifies the machine at a very deep level. So if you have some type of compromised print driver out there or some type of malicious print driver, if you give just regular users the ability to do that, well, then it's pretty much giving them the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah, it's game over.
And it's game over. Yeah, you could
Yeah,
install a
that's
print
kind of
driver.
that's an old trick, right?
Oh,
Infected print driver. I mean, that's like I don't know what year that would be, but yeah, there's no way you should be doing that because those bad print drivers are, a phishing email. Hey, it's tech support. You got to update your print driver. Click here, and here comes your infection along with it. So no, just no.
And even layering on top of that too, with the CIS control, and then what Senteon does as well about even limiting the UAC prompt, right?
Yep.
Is people. I've had, when I say complaints, and of course when we started making the change and not allowing that
workflow changes.
Yeah, people are like, oh, well, what do you mean you can't just log into my? I got to log out of my computer. I got to have you or lock my computer to have you. Yes, you do.
Yep.
So it goes.
We don't trust you. We don't trust you. We have zero trust in you.
Exactly, zero trust. It's kind of like me. Oh, I love you, but I don't trust you.
Can't exactly say that though. You got to, I don't know, put a little varnish on that. But that's what you're thinking, though, isn't it, Marty?
100%, 100%. Well, we know what IT administrators or system administrators or people or security administrators, by nature, we are control freaks.
Oh yeah.
Because the only way I can guarantee something is going to be safe is if I completely control it.
Yep.
I like it. All right, we got 3 more settings in 4 minutes, Marty. So manage processing of queue-specific files is set to enabling a limit. I can intuitively think why we would want this, but explain it for us.
You know what? I haven't used this one that often, honestly, but I can see why. I think really what it comes down to is the amount of really the amount of printing, the type of printing you're doing. I haven't researched this, so I apologize. I haven't really seen that particular queue specific for files to a color profile.
It can essentially be like a DDoS attack on the printer. If that really causes stress, that's your call, I guess.
Yep. I can see that because number one, typically printing color takes more processing time and things like that.
More expensive.
Yeah, more expensive. Yeah.
Yep. I think that's spot on. All right, these last 2 settings are both about point and print restrictions. So tell us what point and print is, and then explain to us a little bit more about this first recommendation here.
Cool. Point and print. Let's see here. You know what? I don't remember that one either.
I have no idea what that is, Zach. So I have zero help.
Sorry, viewers. I'm not sure what that one is. But you know what?
Viewers, we will circle back.
We need a lifeline from the chat.
Well, good thing I can pop up my share screen and pull this up for us. So that's perfectly fine. We will do a slight pause while I click share screen.
It's not a big printer. This is something that's out of my wheelhouse.
Oh, okay. So basically, from my 2 seconds of Googling, it refers to the capability of allowing a user to create a connection to a remote printer without providing disks or other installation media. Okay, so it looks like it plays into the whole installation of drivers, to where instead of having to have a driver on your computer to be able to print to this printer, you just point to you just print something to a location that you don't need the driver for. And again, I think where that's coming into play and where that would come into play is you're creating that data connection again between your machine and then whatever you're printing to. But
that data could potentially be intercepted, right, by malicious actor if it was for confidential information in that instance.
Yep, and I'm pulling up right here the CIS benchmarks for this setting. So point and print here, they actually do reference Print Nightmare in their own rationale for hardening this setting. So this is going to be another setting CIS recommends to harden to mitigate the risk of falling victim to that Print Nightmare. And then the next setting here, the other point and print one, has to do with updating drivers for an existing connection. Same thing here. It's also going to be talking about. So this relates directly to some CVEs and recognitions of preventing that.
What I love about the CIS benchmarks, they give you the rationale. If you're like, well, I don't know what that means, go to the benchmark and it'll tell you the rationale. So it'll take the mystery out of what it means.
Yeah. And then to Senteon's credit too, like for example, gosh, I haven't seen those or thought about those particular settings. But guess what? Senteon would have told me.
Yep.
They would have told me, oh, you don't have this set properly.
I think that's one of the biggest myths that honestly I have to overcome a lot of times with MSPs is setting all of the L1 CIS hardening recommendations is extremely disruptive. That is the mentality. It's going to break everything. It's going to create more work. But Marty, you've used our solution for quite a while. Obviously, we have plenty of other partners telling us, and for the most part, they're doing 96, 98% of all the recommendations and not experiencing disruption. So please change your default settings. It's the #1 attack vector. Don't leave things in default.
Yeah. And really, too, for the most part, Zach, honestly, there's been a lot of some clients that I've deployed them on to where I just did all the CIS level 1. Senteon's recommended for CIS level 1, and just said, yep, just do it. And everything has been fine. So I think it comes down to, coming in into an existing environment, or B, what that environment is doing. If you have an environment that is doing just very simple office file sharing and printing, it's an office environment, they're printing and they're browsing the web and they're doing things like that. Some, simple stuff. I think the CIS level 1, I'm 98% sure that it's not going to break anything.
Yep.
Now, if you go into a little more
general level 1 anyway.
What's that?
That's the goal anyway. There might be exceptions here and there.
Exactly. Like there was one exception. There was one particular client we deployed down level 1, and then 2 users used a camera software on their desktop to be able to view the cameras. It broke those cameras. Broke that software. And then number 2, they had people this one was a major one. We had to change it, but what was major about it was the fact that no one could log in to their computers anymore. And you know what the problem was? The problem was their domain controller was a 2003 Active Directory.
So it needed a legacy connection.
When you made those unveiling,
exactly the way it should.
Exactly right. So for them temporarily, we had to turn off Senteon until we got them upgraded to 2016. Is where we put
not a secure configuration. Yep.
Nope.
So you're telling me by hardening your systems, it outlined deeper issues that could have been exploited and you never would have known about without hardening the systems.
Absolutely. Yep.
Man, that sounds like a good use case to use the CIS benchmarks and plug Senteon to implement them.
We've done some DC issues. I mean, DCs are the keys to the kingdom, so don't mess that up.
No.
Awesome. All right, well, let's go ahead and start wrapping up here. We're already a couple minutes over, but we did cover all of these settings, so congrats. We have one more slide here, but we already did it. So, Marty, we're 2 minutes over, but any concluding thoughts that you want to share before I wrap up?
Well, just from a standpoint of just security in general, not just related to printers, but just security in general. The MSP needs to remember that it's their butt on the line too. Because with the way that insurance companies are getting, with the way that with customers not able to, a customer not able to get either insurance because they don't have a good security plan or an audit, or if something happens and with insurance companies not saying they want to pay out. Keep in mind that you as the provider can be held accountable too. And so really it is in your best interest as an MSP or MSSP to do everything, even if you do have to push on that client and go, no, we're doing this. It's in both your guys' best interest to do things the right way, because when it does happen, and not if, when it does happen, A, you're more protected, and B, both you and your customer have defense to be able to go, no, we were doing this. This is what we were doing. And so the insurance company or anybody else that you're trying to convince that you're doing your job has less of a leg to stand on not to pay you or not to take care of you. So just keep that in mind. Again, I go back to what we say, our stance is right on our website, no compromise security.
Yeah, it's critical for, basic cybersecurity hygiene. It's also just good business. You're gonna generate project work. It's just, it's critical for your protection and your customers' protection, but it's gonna drive projects for you too. So
absolutely.
It's a win-win-win.
Absolutely.
Well, Marty, thank you for letting me pull your teeth and have you talk about printers with us today. I know it's not the most enjoyable topic, but we love having you on. So,
what? I might actually go out and get a printer now, Marty. I'm inspired.
Don't get HP. Oh, did I say that?
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We are here every single week. We aim to do this every Wednesday at 1 p.m. if we can highlight that slide. To next week's guest, we do have Roddy, another returner guest, and he's going to be talking about some of these next generation hardening settings. So
Excellent.
This is not for the faint of heart, hardening your systems. And then we do have Adam Evans coming back as well at the end of November to close out our Thanksgiving week. And we have a new guest, David Kreitz, coming in to talk about internet communication management. So really excited for all these topics. Love having the guests come on every week. We do have a newsletter where we dive in a little bit deeper to all this. I do my best to keep up with it. There are so many settings, but I appreciate you being here. And as always, Rich and I are happy to connect after the show. Marty, feel free to drop your LinkedIn into the chat. If you do want to give Senteon a whirl, feel free to download a free instance here with this QR code and do a risk assessment. See where you sit currently with CIS. See where you are with this. So appreciate you being here. Thank you.